started. All right. So again, thank you everybody for coming to the Neighborhood Council election review for Region 8. So I'll go over the meeting agenda really quickly. We're going to go over election documents that we utilize to help create the election for every neighborhood council. Then I'm going to go through the candidate filing process. I'm also going to go through the all vote by mail election model for 2025. Because as a reminder, our office was only funded to conduct an all vote by mail election for neighborhood councils in 2025. Then I'll be reviewing some election resources specific to Region 8. And then I'll open it up to questions. And we should have a good amount of time to go over any sort of questions that come up and that are region specific. So first, I want to kind of highlight the NC bylaws, especially the sections that we utilize when we are developing the election for every neighborhood council. So we always look at Article 3, which contains the boundaries. That's both the exterior boundaries of the neighborhood council, and it includes if there's any internal boundaries or if there's any shared assets with other neighborhood councils. Article 4 discusses the 4 stakeholder types. In the next slide, I'll break down those 4 stakeholder types. Article 5 talks about the governing board. So this will list out the structure for each neighborhood council. It will also include some information on terms. If there's term limits, if there's staggered seating, this is often covered as well in Article 5. Article 10 will cover elections. This will discuss the voter verification type, if there's any special candidate restrictions or special voting regulations for that neighborhood council, that will be covered in Article 10. Then we go to Attachment A, which is a visual of Article 3. So it has the NC map. Then we have Attachment B, which our office refers to quite often, which details the governing board structure and the voting model, candidate and voter requirements. So it will list out every seat that's on that board, how that person is elected, selected, or appointed. Then it will have the candidate qualifications and then the voter qualifications for every seat. So as I mentioned, I want to go through the 4 different stakeholder types. Just as a refresher, every neighborhood council has these 4 stakeholder types. So the first one's going to be live, obviously. So that's anyone who resides within the neighborhood council boundaries. Next is work. This is anyone who provides services within the neighborhood council boundaries. Then we have owning real property. So that's anyone who owns real property within the neighborhood council boundaries. And the fourth one, community interest stakeholder. This definition is pretty extensive. I listed it here just because it's, even though it was changed in 2020, I think we're still trying to make sure that everybody knows what a community interest stakeholder is. So this is defined as a person who participates in a nonprofit organization that has continuously maintained a physical street address for not less than 1 year and performs ongoing and verifiable activities and operations that benefit the neighborhood. The unique thing about community interest stakeholder is there's a requirement on the stakeholder to participate in the organization, and then for the organization that they participate in to be a nonprofit organization that has continuously maintained a physical street address for not less than 1 year. One thing I do want to highlight when we talk about stakeholder types, citizenship is not a requirement when we talk about stakeholders. The only requirement are that they fall into one of these 4 categories. So we take all of that information from the bylaws and we create a ballot voting model, BVMs for short. And I want to kind of walk through what the BVMs look like and the information contained in them. All of the BVMs for Region 8 were emailed to the boards. So if you are on the board and you didn't happen to see your ballot voting model, you can drop that information in the chat and I'll make sure to get that over to you. But just to briefly go over the ballot voting model, right here, you're going to see the neighborhood council name and abbreviation. This is the information that's going to be on all election materials, such as the ballots, the candidate, the certified list of candidates, the official results will always be matched this name, and that abbreviation will be listed. Next, we have a breakdown of information. So the first one is going to be ballot types. So how many ballot types there are in that neighborhood council. So this one, for example, has 9 different ballot types. Under that will be ballots issued. Ballots issued means how many ballots each stakeholder could receive. So for example, here, stakeholders can only receive 1 ballot type. However, there are certain neighborhood councils where they might be able to receive up to 10 ballot types. It's going to depend on the neighborhood council's voting model. A lot of this information would again go back to the bylaws in Article 10. Next, we'll see the board seats. So it will list out how many board seats there are on that neighborhood council, along with how many are up for election. The term for those seats, it's always 2 or 4-year terms. The voting age is 16 years or above for all seats except for the U seat. When it's a U seat, the U stakeholders 14 and 15 are eligible to vote for that U seat. Stakeholder verification. This is always self-affirmation documentation. A little bit later in the presentation, I'll be going over those 2 different verification types and their differences. Next is candidate restrictions. Most common is going to be candidates can run for no more than 1 board seat. However, some NCs may have different restrictions, such as candidates cannot be seated in a city council office seat, is one I've seen before. Things like that. But again, that will all come straight from the bylaws. Under other election related language, we'll have any shared boundaries or assets with other neighborhood councils will be listed here. For example, this one says Venice High. That's because Venice High School is within the boundaries of Venice Neighborhood Council and Mar Vista Community Council. So just to make sure that everybody's in agreement on that. Then we list out the vote by mail period. And then we do a breakdown of every ballot. So all 9 of these ballot types will be listed. So we start with the title for that ballot, the requirements to receive that ballot, and then we list out every seat that will be on that ballot, including the number of seats. So in this example, the at-large director, there's 7 seats that will be listed there. So the voter will be able to vote for up to 7 at-large director seats. And then it goes to the next ballot. So there's zone 2 ballot. So that's the ballot voting model. Now that we've gone through all of the prep, I want to go through once candidate filing opens, what that process looks like. Candidate filing for Region 8 will be January 3rd, 2025 through February 17th, 2025. That's a 45-day period. That's 45 calendar days. That's across all regions. All candidates receive that 45-day candidate filing period. There are 2 different ways that candidates can apply. One is through the neighborhood council portal, and then there's also paper applications. We do have paper applications available on our website in PDF fillable format. They are translated into 13 other languages. So those are available to stakeholders. While I mentioned briefly earlier that the NC can choose the voter verification type of self-affirmation or documentation, when it comes to candidates, all candidates are required to provide documentation proving stakeholder status to show that they meet the requirements for that seat, regardless of the voter verification type. When we talk about documentation for candidates, there's 3 things that we're looking for. One is a photo ID, another is proof of age, and lastly, proof of stakeholder status. Most common example of this is going to be driver's license, because that one document can cover all 3 of these things, because it will have a photo ID, proof of age, and proof of stakeholder status. As long as it's a valid driver's license, we can accept it for all 3 of those. So once our office receives the application, reviews the documentation, we will certify candidates. Certified candidates are the candidates that will be listed on the ballot. There is a period of time after a candidate is certified that candidates can be challenged. A common example of a candidate challenge may be if that neighborhood council has term limits, and someone might want to challenge a candidate stating that the person has already exceeded their terms. So our office will review those challenges and affirm or deny them. If it's affirmed, that candidate certification will have to be removed. And so after all of that, after the candidate challenge period, after the withdrawal deadline, we will release a certified list of candidates. This is released 60 days prior to election day. And it includes all of the candidates who will be on the ballot, and it will include the random alpha order for all of the candidates. We also release a information to neighborhood councils with all the candidates' contact information that was provided. Should the neighborhood council host a forum or maybe have an election event, so that they can invite all of the candidates. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch screens really quick. And I'm going to walk through the paper application along with the portal. So the first one is, this is the paper application for candidates applying in 2025. The first section, they will be including the neighborhood council information, which will be the neighborhood council, I guess I scrolled too high, the neighborhood council name, and then the seat name that they would like to run for. Next is the candidate information. So they include the name that they would like to appear on the ballot. One thing worth noting when it comes to neighborhood councils, the name on the ballot can be the name of what that candidate is known by in the community. So for example, here, this candidate's first name is Theo. However, maybe his middle name is Victor, and that's what he's known by in the community. So his name on the ballot can be Victor Aguilar. So the name on the ballot. Next are pronouns. Candidates, this is optional, but candidates can list their pronouns that they would like to see listed on the candidate website. This is only listed on the candidate website. It's not listed on the certified list of candidates or the ballots or anything like that. It's merely just for the candidate website. Then we have the first name and last name. Next is birth year. We only ask for the birth year on the application. However, we might have to contact that candidate if it's most common with like a youth seat. If we need to make sure that by election day they meet the age requirement, we might have to get more information. But since for candidates, the age requirement is usually just 18 years or above, birth year will be fine for that. Next is phone number and email. This is an optional field, however, highly recommended, so that if there's any questions, we can contact those candidates. Plus, this information can be provided to the neighborhood council, as I mentioned, in case the neighborhood council is having any events that they would like to invite candidates to. This is the information that we release to the neighborhood councils. I do also want to highlight that if we get an application that has just a name and a phone number, we will reach out to those candidates to work with them to see if we can get the information we need to certify them and walk them through the whole process. We don't get an incomplete application and go, it's incomplete, we're not going to deal with it. Any information we get, we will work with those candidates to do the best that we can to get them certified. Next, there's the question, are you a current board member in this neighborhood council? Yes or no? This just really helps with those term limit questions. Underneath that, there's the option to initial if you agree to receive neighborhood council information from Empower LA via text. That's optional, but welcome to include it. And so the next section is going to be qualifying address, and we state complete all that apply. The reason that we do this is some seats might need, you might have to live and have community interest, or there could be a mixture of things that are required based off the seat. Sometimes we might have someone that puts live and their work address, and one of those is not in the boundaries, but the other one is. And so we're able to work with that information. So we have it broken down by the 4 different stakeholder types. And it's pretty self-explanatory. So this one, for example, they work in the neighborhood council, so they put the organization that they work for, the address for that organization, and then they check which one of these they apply for. We have these boxes just because this will help with certain seats. A neighborhood council, for example, might have an employee seat. They might also have a business owner seat. So all of these kind of align with some of the requirements throughout the neighborhood council system. So after filling out the qualifying address section, there's the documentation section where they can list any documentation that they are including with that application. So for this application, since this candidate works, they're including a driver's license, which meets the photo ID and age requirement, and then pairing it with a pay stub, which will tie them to the work organization, which is within the neighborhood council. Under that, they can declare under penalty of perjury that the above statements are true and correct. They just sign and date, and that is all that's needed to submit an application. We do have a second page where candidate statements can be provided. If a statement is provided here, we match what is included here exactly. The main requirement when it comes to candidate statements are it cannot exceed 1,000 characters. That's including punctuation, spacing, and all of that. If there's misspellings here, we match it. It's as is. I'll get into candidate photos and statements in a little bit, but that's the paper application. Next, I'm going to go through the neighborhood council candidate filing portal. So the great thing that we're able to do with this election is last election season, the candidate filing portal was attached to Angelino accounts. You can log in through your Angelino account to access the portal, but you can also go straight through the portal. Just a second while the page refreshes. It looks like the test. Let me change something real quick. If there's any issue to create an account, the first thing someone does is they just click need an account, register here. And you type in your first name, last name, email confirmation, and click create. When you click create, an email will be sent to that email with a link to create a password for that account. So you just click on that link, it'll take you to create a password and you're able to log in. If you have any issues, you can hit forgot your password and it will send you an email with a link to set a new password. If you have any issues with that, you can always contact our office and we can help you. We can only help you if you go straight through the portal. If you're going through Angelino accounts, you have to go through Angelino account to get that fixed, to update your password and if there's any issues. But now that I've created an account, I have a password, I'll just log in. And so the Neighborhood Council portal covers both candidates and voters. So as you can see here, I have candidate highlighted and it says create a candidate application. So just to do that, and you can start the candidate filing application. This is broken up into 5 different steps. The first one is going to be the Neighborhood Council. So I will select Neighborhood Council. It's only going to show the neighborhood councils where candidate filing is open. As we stated earlier, so candidate filing is not open for Region 8, but this is a test site, so I have it open right now. Once you select the neighborhood council, there will be a drop-down menu for the seats. This will only list the seats that are currently up for election. So if a neighborhood council has staggered seating, you won't see all of the seats on the board, only the ones that are up. You can select the seat that you're interested in. Once you select that seat, the requirements for that seat will pop up, and that will stay up through all of the steps. So I will choose, then you choose your stakeholder type. There's the 4 stakeholder types. So I'll just choose live. And then you can select, are you a current board member in this neighborhood council? So you choose yes or no. I'll choose no. I can hit next. So now I'm in step 2 of the candidate application. So this is where I provide my candidate information. So first thing is going to be name as it will appear on the ballot. So it could be the same as that previous example. Maybe I go by Julian in the neighborhood. So I can include my name on the ballot there. There's the option to include pronouns. Then the great thing about setting an account up through the portal is your first name, last name, and email will be pulled directly from your registration information, but this is all editable. So let's say what's most common is I set up my account with an email, but I want a specific email for my registration, or I just have another email that I refer to more often. You can edit this information at any time. So then you have to include date of birth with the application. When you're going through the portal, it does require the month and date. However, it's understandable. Some people are not comfortable with that. So I always just recommend they can put 0101 and then include the year. So let's include a birth date there. If there's any questions about it, we can contact that stakeholder. But usually the requirement, as you can see here, is just 18 years or above. So as long as that date of birth is 18 years or above for the year, we will be good. Then there's including a phone number. If a candidate does not want to include a phone number, they can click decline to state their phone number. And lastly, there's the option, click if you agree to receive neighborhood council information from Empower LA via text. That's optional, so I'll leave it unchecked, and it just moves me on to step 3. So step 3 is going to be qualifying address. Whenever we talk about qualifying address, this is the address tied to your stakeholder type. So if I chose community interest because I go to a church in a neighborhood council, this would be the church address. If I work, this is my work address. But I chose live, so I'll type this in. It has this saying this is my live address. So you just type in the address. The great thing about going through the portal is once you type in that address, the candidate can click verify qualifying address. And the system will plot that address and see if it falls within the neighborhood council. So for example, you can see the requirements for this seat are that it's within the neighborhood council boundaries. You can see that it's plotted and the neighborhood council boundaries is highlighted in green. If this was an area specific seat, such as an area 1, in this neighborhood council, only area 1 would be highlighted because that's the requirement that's attached to that seat. If for any reason that maybe that address is not being plotted within the boundaries, or if there's any issues, it does not stop the application from being submitted. Applications can still be submitted if the address is not, if there's any issues with the address, and we'll contact the candidate if there's any clarification that's needed on our side. But this is just a handy tool when completing an application. And then under that is the mailing address. They can click same as qualifying, different from qualifying, or decline to state. I'll just click decline to state. And then you hit next. So candidate filing, the candidate filing deadline is required that the application be submitted. Once these two pop-up windows have been accepted and agreed to, the application is considered submitted. With candidate filing, there's an additional 3 days after candidate filing close where candidates can provide documentation proving stakeholder status. But the requirement is that by 11:59 on the deadline, the application is at least submitted. So that would mean accepting this pop-up, which is the penalty of perjury, and the reminder to provide any required documentation by the deadline. And click submit. Next is the Neighborhood Council Board Member Candidate for Election Board Service Acknowledgement and Affirmation Form. This is a form that has a wealth of knowledge about the Neighborhood Council system and activities that board members participate in and processes. This is available on our website and Empower LA's website to refer to at any point. So that is, you click accept and then hit submit. And that completes step 3, which again, steps 1 through 3 are all that's required to be completed by the candidate filing deadline. Then there's that 3 additional days to provide documentation. If you want to do it all at once, that's great, but not required. But now in the documentation step. So if there's any questions about what type of documentation is needed, we do have the documentation guide linked here. So you can click on that. The great thing about the documentation guide is we have the pages broken down to some of the most common stakeholder types. So for example, if you live in the neighborhood council as a homeowner resident, it will provide different examples of documentation we use for that stakeholder type. So for this one, it lists examples of proof of home ownership. Yes, Michael Sweeney, I see your hand is raised.
Sorry, can you go back to the application portal?
Yeah.
Can I request that you guys change proof of live to actually match the terminology in the document you're showing? It says proof of ID and then it says proof of live, which is not really, I mean, it's bad grammar, but also it doesn't match what somebody would be looking for.
Well, the reason I think that's a good suggestion, we can definitely take a look at that. The proof of live will change to if it's either proof of live, proof of community interest, or whichever stakeholder type they chose. So that will change. But I definitely will take a look at that and see what we can do for the future. So.
Sorry, I just saw it and I was like, it's a very confusing thing, especially for people who might be doing this for the first time and if English isn't your this is hard. That's a weird phrase, even if English is your first language.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely. I will jot that down for sure, and then we can take a look at it. But as I mentioned, so the documentation guide is really, it's an example. It provides some examples of documents that we often receive. It's not an exhaustive list. It's just examples of what we often receive for these stakeholder types. But what we can do is you simply choose the documentation type. We just have some simple examples of what we commonly receive for these documents. So proof of ID, most common, we get driver's license. So you can select that and then you can select the file or drag it there. So I'm just going to drag a file there. And you get a notice that the document was uploaded and that our office will be reviewing that document. What is common is, let's say this is just a proof of, you just have to prove that you're a stakeholder that lives within the neighborhood council boundaries. So if a driver's license works for that, you don't have to provide any more documentation. Just that one document would work. However, there's some cases where you might have to provide multiple documentation based on the candidate requirements, or if let's say it can be a little bit more complicated because maybe you have a driver's license that doesn't have your current address, you can pair it with a utility bill or a different type of document. So we can click next because I'll just say that driver's license will work for that. And we're on to the final step of the application, which is the candidate profile, which will have an option to include a candidate photo and statement. This is optional. It does not have to be completed at the time of the application. There's actually up to 35 days before election day that this can be uploaded and edited. If you might upload something and then decide a week later there's more information that you want to provide or you want to edit it. As long as it's within that time frame, you can. So to upload a candidate photo, just select a file. So I'll select a photo. And there's the option to you can edit it a little bit. We have it so that all candidate photos will be the same size on the candidate website. So you can see I edited it a little bit and maybe I'm like, oh, I want to center it a little bit more. You can edit it. Once you're happy, you can click use this image. And then underneath that is the option to include a candidate statement. So as I mentioned, candidate statements can only be 1,000 characters. That's including spacing and punctuation. It's also including translation. Sometimes people want to have some of their statement in English and some of it in Spanish. All of that has to meet the 1,000 character limit. So you can just type in as you can see down here, it starts to track how many characters you've used of the 1,000 characters. And you just click save, and that application has been submitted. One thing I do want to note about candidate photos and statements, our office does review them before they go on the candidate website. The reason for that is we often have it where someone might accidentally upload their driver's license as a candidate photo. And so we want to make sure that that doesn't go straight to the candidate website. And then they have their sensitive private information just posted out there to see. For every application that is submitted, the great thing is you can log into the portal and track those applications. Uh, you'll once you create an application, you'll have what we call a candidate tile, and you'll have one for every application that you submit. There's multiple times where candidates might be eligible for multiple boards, so they can submit applications for multiple boards. So you would have one tile for every one of those applications. So you'd see the ballot name here. If there is a photo submitted, you'd see the photo here. You see the election, the seat that application is for, the stakeholder type, and then the status of that stakeholder. So, or that application. So for this one, for example, I'm certified, and then it includes some filing dates and deadlines. And then there's the option for candidate photo and statement. So you can just go in to edit the photo and statement at any time during that period, which is prior to the 35 days before election day. And then there's also an option to withdraw, because let's say that I'm running for the student at large representative seat, but then I realize there's actually a seat that I would prefer to run on. You can only submit one application per neighborhood council unless that neighborhood council allows candidates to run for multiple seats. However, most do not. So to run for a different seat in that neighborhood council, I would have to click withdraw and then submit a new application for the other seat I would like to run for. One thing I want to state about the candidate website is, let me take you to the homepage. So our candidate website will have all of the NCs where candidate filing has started. So we can go on, let's go to Central San Pedro. And there's a lot of information that's contained on the candidate website. First is going to be the seat name, the term for that seat, how many seats are up for election, the qualifications to run for that seat, and the qualifications to vote for that seat. Then we have the candidate photos and statements. Candidates will be in the random alpha order that will match the ballot. The seats, if it's a neighborhood council that has multiple seats up for election, the seats will also be in the same order that they will be on the certified list of candidates. And so you have the candidate information. Here's one where it's the ballot name, status, and then the candidate statement. And then underneath each candidate, it will list the candidate documentation that was used to certify. So if a candidate is pending, that's not listed because they have not been certified yet. So we don't know which documentation we will be able to certify them with. But once someone is certified, it will list out the documentation used. Here, I do also want to highlight that candidate documentation, once a candidate is certified, their documentation is deleted. We don't have access to that documentation anymore. We just have our notes that we utilized to certify those candidates. And so with that, I'll get back to our presentation. So I went through the paper application, went through the portal. And now I'm going to go to the all vote by mail registration process. So for Region 8, this is going to be between March 7th, 2025 to April 27th, 2025. So the first step is going to be vote by mail application submitted. It is important to note that applications must be submitted every election. This is not like municipal candidates or municipal voters where you're on a voter roll and you are registered to vote for every election. With neighborhood councils, you have to register every election. The reason for that is your stakeholder status may have changed, the bylaws may have changed. So we want to make sure that we are providing all of the information that all of the proper ballots that you are eligible to receive. Once we receive an application, our staff will review that application to verify eligibility to vote based off the bylaws. If we have any issues, we will be contacting those voters to get the information needed to verify eligibility. The third step is the ballot packet is mailed. What we include in the ballot packet is going to be the ballot or ballots if that neighborhood council allows voters to receive multiple ballots, the instructions, which will include information on the candidate website, including QR code, URL, to review the candidate photos and statements. It will also include election day, which will list the deadline to postmark ballots, along with different ways to return your ballot. And lastly, it will include a prepaid return envelope so that this is no expense to voters. So the next step is stakeholders vote. So they receive their ballot and they vote. And lastly, ballot is returned. So there's 3 different ways that ballots can be returned. I'll go into this a little bit more, but it can be USPS. So that's using that prepaid return envelope. We will have neighborhood council ballot boxes available throughout each region. And they can always be returned to our office as well. And I do want to highlight, the neighborhood council portal does send a lot of email notifications so that voters are able to track their application and their ballot. So once an application is submitted, the voter will receive an email. Once we have verified their eligibility, they will receive an email. They will also get an email once the ballot packet has been mailed. This is really helpful. So let's say that I got an email that my ballot packet was mailed 2 weeks ago. I still haven't seen my ballot. You can always contact our office and we'll be able to send out a resend for that voter. And then also they'll receive a ballot or an email when the ballot is returned to our office so that they can know that not only did they vote, but that will be included in the tally. So I do want to break down, I want to talk about voter verification a little bit and talk about the differences between self-affirmation and documentation. So when we talk about voter verification, the first thing we're looking for is identity. So with self-affirmation, the voter provides information on their application. When it comes to documentation, we need a photo ID with the application. So for example, a driver's license. The next thing that we're looking for is age. So with self-affirmation, they provide date of birth on the application. When it comes to documentation, we need a document with the date of birth. Again, most common example of that is going to be driver's license or a California issued ID or passport works for that as well. And then lastly, the thing that we need is stakeholder status. So with self-affirmation, they're providing stakeholder status and the address on the application. When it comes to documentation, we need a document with stakeholder status information. So I put utility bill here because maybe I have a driver's license with a different address than my current address. So I could use my driver's license has my photo ID and document with the date of birth. But you pair that with a utility bill, a current utility bill, to prove that I live within the neighborhood council. So next is the stakeholder registration options. Just like candidate filing, there's a two different ways, but I wanted to kind of highlight some of the benefits of the two different ways. The first one is online registration. This is open, it's a 51-day filing period to register for a vote by mail ballot. And through the portal, they're able to track their application and ballot status at any time. So they can log in and see the status of their application to see if it's been anything from submitted to their ballot returned. Next is the paper registration. So this is an 81-day filing period. So the vote by mail applications are available on our website, translated into multiple languages. These will be PDF fillable forms. They can easily be filled out and emailed to us, or just printed out, filled out, and returned to us. A great benefit of the paper registration form is voters can designate an authorized agent to collect an application. So for example, maybe I want to get the information out there about my neighborhood council, and I want to go through my neighborhood and provide that information, hand out applications. If that authorized agent portion is completed, I can collect all of those applications in my neighborhood and send them into our office to be processed. So I'm going to go through the applications. Let's see. Okay, so this is the 2025 Neighborhood Council Vote by Mail application. The first portion is going to be voter information. So they include the neighborhood council. Then they include their name, birth year, phone number, and email. Again, this is optional, but highly recommended because this is the only way that we can reach out to those candidates most of the time, or voters, if we have any issues. Just like candidates, let's say that we get an application that has a name and a phone number. We will be reaching out to those voters to see what information they can provide to assure that we can send them the ballot that they are eligible for. Under that, they can initial if they agree to receive neighborhood council information from Empower LA via text. And then we have the qualifying address. Just like candidate filing application, it says complete all that apply, and it's broken down into the 4 different stakeholder types. The reason that it says complete all that apply, very similar to the candidate application. This additional information can really help assure that we're providing all the ballots that this voter is eligible for. So for example, they included a live address and community interest address. So if this neighborhood council might have a ballot for stakeholders who live and a ballot for community interest stakeholders, because they provided this, we'll be able to send both of those ballots. Then they include their mailing address if it's different from above. So let's say that you work within the neighborhood council, the mailing address is just where you want to receive your mail, because maybe you don't want to get your ballot at your work. So you can include your mailing address, and then they sign under penalty of perjury that everything is true and correct. And then the last section is the authorized agent portion. So this is where as I mentioned, so maybe I'm a part of the neighborhood council, I'm out in the neighborhood providing the application to my neighbors. I can, once I start collecting them, have this portion filled out, which would be the authorized agent name, so myself, and then a signature from the authorized agent, so that I can hand out these applications and collect them. So then the neighborhood council portal, it's that same portal. Just hit login, click voter, and create voter application. The voter application is broken up into 2 or 3 steps. It depends on the voter verification type. But this first step is going to be voter information. Just like the candidate page, the first name and last name and email is going to be pulled from that registration account, but it can be edited. So maybe I'll put, Mike there. Then you can include date of birth, but I can put 0101 if I don't want to include that. Don't want to include my full birth date. There's the option to include a contact preference, whichever way, it's better for you to be contacted. So we have the email listed here, and then you can include a phone number if you'd like to. And then the option, click if you agree to receive neighborhood council information from a power relay via text. This is optional. And then you can click next. So now we're on to step 2. So this is the election information. So when the first part is selecting a neighborhood council. So I'll choose Glassell Park. So once I choose a neighborhood council, because this neighborhood council is documentation required, it goes from 2 steps to 3 steps because documentation is required. If it was self-affirmation, once I complete this page, that's all that would be required to register. But because this is documentation required, there's the added step of uploading documentation. So after you select the neighborhood council, you select stakeholder type. There's the 4 stakeholder types. So every time that you click one, a box will appear underneath. So as you can see, one appeared for residence address. Then if I click work, I have an option to include my work address as well, but I'll just include live. So let me type in a address real quick. Just like the candidate application, you can click verify address. So it will plot that address within the neighborhood councils. And if it's able to do it, it will say address is within the boundaries. But if for any reason the system is having issues plotting the address, it won't stop the voter from submitting the application. So I'll just hit close. Then let me copy this so you don't have to see me type that again. So then now you include the mailing address. You can click verify mailing address, but this will also take place when you hit next. If this was self-affirmation, instead of seeing next here, it would be submit, because that's all that would be required for self-affirmation. But when you hit next, you will automatically get that pop-up window, very similar to when you're ordering anything online. It will check with USPS to make sure to verify that the address matches their system. This is most common. Going to be the pop-up because it will add those 4 digits for USPS. You can click no use address I provided if there's anything that you don't agree with here. Like if it maybe there was a change for some reason, you can click no use a address I provided, or just click yes. And then now we have the documentation type. So again, we have the documentation guide linked there, and you can upload a document. So for example, just pick a driver's license. So I can select a file, and my address is uploaded. It does, every time that you upload something, it does give you the option to upload more documents, because going back to that example where maybe I have a driver's license that I need to pair with another piece of information. So you can just keep doing that. But I feel that the driver's license is all that's needed. So I can click submit. And once you do that, you get a pop-up window declaring under penalty of perjury that the information that you provided is true and correct. So you can hit accept and hit submit. And that is the submitting a voter application in the portal. As I mentioned, you will get a voter card for each application. So we'll have the election, it will have the status of that election, of that application. So for example, this one says mailed. This one down here is awaiting ballot assignment. It will have the name, email, the date it was submitted, and the deadline. And then an option to edit if needed. When it comes to voters, technically, if you have stakeholder status in all of the NCs that are having elections, you can submit an application for every neighborhood council that you have stakeholder status in. And that could be, quite a few. But you can only submit one application per account. So if if you're with your family, maybe you're a family of 4 living in one household, every member would have to create an account to file through the portal. However, if you hand out the paper application, you can do the authorized agent portion to collect all of those and send those into our office. So with that, let me get back to the presentation. So I want to go over some important vote by mail dates for Region 8. The first one is vote by mail application period opens on Friday, March 7th. Ballot mailing will begin Tuesday, April 1st. Vote by mail application period will end Sunday, April 27th. The deadline to request resend ballots is Tuesday, April 29th. This is to provide enough time for that ballot to get in the mail and delivered to voters in time to vote. Election day for Region 8 is Tuesday, May 6th. And the deadline to receive postmarked ballots is Friday, May 16th. This is 10 days after Election Day. So all ballots have to be postmarked on May 6th, but they have 10 days to get to our office to be included in the tally. Returning ballots. So there's going to be those 3 different ways that they can be returned by Election Day, which is May 6, 2025. So there's USPS. Again, with USPS, they can be postmarked on Election Day and received 10 days thereafter. We will have ballot box locations available at certain library and rec and park locations. I'll be listing those in the next slide. And ballots can also be returned to our office. So I do want to highlight these locations where we have partnered with Rec and Park and library locations in Region 8. These locations will have candidate filing applications available. They will have vote by mail applications available. They will also have ballot boxes available to drop off ballots. So these are the locations that are going to be available within Region 8. So during the candidate filing period is when they'll have those applications. During the vote by mail, that's when they will have those applications, and then ballot boxes will be available 35 days prior to election day to match the date where ballots are being mailed out. Then lastly, I want to highlight election administrators in our office. We have 4 different election administrators. They're assigned to various neighborhood councils. They will be your contact throughout the election season. They will be providing election information, including we'll send out reminders when candidate filing opens. We will also be sending out weekly stats on candidate filing and vote by mail, so that it's easy to track how many candidates there are, how many vote by mail applications have been received to our office, that kind of information. And they're also just available if you have any questions about the administration. So feel free to reach out to them by email or phone. You can always reach out to myself as well. I think everybody here has my email access. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation. I know that was a lot to go through. I do want to open it up to questions, but I do want to discuss just briefly. Mary Lou with Empower LA was unavailable to attend tonight due to a scheduling conflict. She is going to reach out to all of the boards within Region 8 to hold a special presentation to go over the outreach efforts by Dunn and some ideas to work with them on the outreach for neighborhood council elections. She will, she does have a PowerPoint, which I will include later this week. I'll be sending out the recording of this presentation along with the PowerPoint slides that she goes over, but she should be reaching out to also help you with any of those outreach materials. I do want to also just reference that we do have on our website, we do have a candidate page. As of right now, we do have a video that's pretty extensive to walk candidates through the neighborhood council portal, to walk them through the whole process. We also are utilizing our social media to create a lot of different posts about candidate filing. We'll do the same when it comes to vote by mail, to walk stakeholders through those 2 processes. And then with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and open it up. If there's any questions or suggestions, and also just reiterate that our office is here to help in any way that we can. You know, we want to really partner with you all through this election season. So if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Michael, I've also put our website link in the chat, as well as Empower LA's website link in the chat in case anybody needs that.
Great, thank you, Lenny. Linda, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm a little confused by all this, I will tell you. What I'd like to know is if, of course, a candidate has to go online to file an application. I get that part, just like in the past. But can we get ballots to give out to voters?
No, so ballots themselves cannot be handed out, but I do highly encourage to hand out applications, and I'd be happy to partner with if there's maybe like a voter information event. We could partner with that and maybe be there to help voters fill out their application, but ballots with all vote by mail, they will have to be mailed their ballots.
Okay, thank
But
you.
the good news is I know the last time we had all vote by mail, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and so there were
Yes.
a lot of restrictions. We don't have those restrictions this time. So, I think one thing to think about, and I think our department, along with Empower LA, would be really open to having kind of like voter events, where we could really help people through the application process.
I'm just concerned that for the voter, to have to go online and request, the ballot, is kind of something that will make people hesitate. So if we had an event, where we had ballots available, since we're self-affirmation, it would surely think, I mean, we do plan on having an event. So I would love to be able to have voters come to that event and be able to get the information rather than going online.
Yeah, we can definitely, what we could do if we have an event, like we could provide a lot of voter applications, and then just work with them to make sure all the information's there. So then we can just go back to our office, process those applications, and mail out the ballots to
Okay, so
voters.
that would work too then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? All right, then I think that we are good for today. If anything comes up, feel free to always reach out. I know everybody here has my email. Feel free to email me, call me. If you have any questions that pop up or any concerns, you can also always reach out to your election administrator. But with that, I really thank you for coming to this presentation. I know it was a lot of information, but I will be emailing out a recording of it along with the slides later this week. So thank you, everybody.